Hi, hello, namaste. Welcome to the first episode of my new series, For the Tube, where I read trending TikTok books and hope that the algorithm gives my channel a much needed break. So, I joined this online book club a couple of months ago, and they seem to be really interested in reading books that don't really resonate with me. We started with Powerless, which was a struggle to get through. Then there was Reckless, which I DNF'd at around 20%. And this month they have chosen Silver Elite by Danny Francis. I know I won't like it, but I really love a supportive book community, so I'm going to give it a shot. Mama didn't raise no quitter, except when it comes to Reckless. But I am going to suffer through the book, so you have to suffer through my thoughts. Before we dive in, disclaimer. This review is for your entertainment only. Criticizing this book is not the same as criticizing your choice to read it. If you read and enjoyed this book, I am happy for you. Now that that's out there, let's dive in. Before we dive into the story, let me give you a brief overview of the world building. In this world, people with superpowers are called silver bloods because their veins literally glow silver anytime they use their powers. Normal people are called primes. Silverbloods used to rule the society, but then there was a revolution, and now the primes are in charge. And silverbloods are hunted, and the society is a military dictatorship. That's basically all the world building the author did, so let's move into the story. The book actually opens on a pretty dark note. We get an entire page explaining how the protagonist's uncle put her through unspeakable horrors. Until this marvelous line hits me like a record scratch. When you're petrified on a daily basis as a child, there aren't many things left to fear as an adult, except perhaps awkward conversations. I would rather fight a cougar barehanded than subject myself to an uncomfortable exchange. Truly. What leads to this line, you ask? Our protagonist, Ren, has just slept with a soldier. Why is that a bad idea? Because, like I said, the military dictatorship in this world has one objective: to kill all the silver bloods. And of course, Ren is a silver blood. Outside the occasional ale induced soldier romp, I hated those assholes, and most of them hated me right back. They are dedicated to wiping out people like me, the aberrant as they call us, or silver bloods when they are feeling nice. Hey Ren, here's a revolutionary idea. Maybe don't sleep with the enemy. Her uncle Jim is also a silver blood. Ren tells us in great detail how her uncle gave up his life of supporting the silver blood revolution when he got custody of her to raise her like his own daughter. They spent 3 years in the forest of unthinkable horrors, and then they settled into a farming and ranching ward where people are allowed to own guns. After proper testing, of course. You can't get a license without extensive testing to prove your competence, but that wasn't a problem for me. I received my weapons approval when I was 13. I'm beyond competent, more than the testers were even aware. Mary Sue who? Anyways, the soldier she just slept with is way too impressed with our protagonist's skills. And so, in order to escape him, she slips out of their room and into a different room, where she promptly runs into who I think is the love interest, based on how long his description was. This guy is inconceivably attractive. I don't think I've ever seen a better looking human, male or female. I'm momentarily lost in his cobalt blue eyes, peering down at me from beneath thick lashes. His hair is dark, swept away from flawless, symmetrical features that could have been chiseled out of stone. Just the right amount of stubble shadows a strong jaw, and one corner of his mouth bears the indentation of a dimple. I wonder how pronounced it gets when he smiles. Although, judging by the cold, dangerous glint in his eyes, I get the feeling he doesn't smile often. This is like a third of the description that she has given, but I'm already bored, so let's move on. They banter for a bit and then she runs out of his room as well. But the soldier catches her by the door. And what do you know? He is so smitten with her, he is willing to take a leave of absence to see her again. They do the equivalent of exchanging numbers and he escorts her to I don't know where. As they are walking, we learn that the dictator heavily monitors and censors conversations and media consumption. She takes him to the village square, where her friend immediately teases her about hooking up with a soldier, telepathically, of course. Hey, here's an idea. Don't use superpowers in front of people who would kill you for having superpowers. Her friend is wearing a long sleeve sweater to hide her glowing veins, but like, don't the veins in her face or her hand glow silver? How does the superpower work anatomically speaking? I do not know, and neither does the writer, I guess. Now, this is where we learn that our main character's veins do not glow silver when she uses telepathy. In her own words, the majority are the very definition of silver bloods. The veins in our arms glowing when we are using our powers. A rare few like me do not fit that mold. Whatever the reason for the anomaly, I can't deny it makes me, well, not to be cocky, but invaluable. Humble much? We get an entire page about how the Silver Blood revolutionaries, or the network, tried very hard to recruit her. Because, of course, every YA dystopian romance needs to have a revolution subplot. She somehow gets rid of the soldier and starts walking towards her bike when a dangerous animal attacks some children in the town square. Sure, may as well happen. If you would remember from like 3 pages ago, our main character is like a kick ass markswoman. From about 100 yards, which is like 91.44 meters in the civilized world, she is able to penetrate the animal's eye in a single shot. Who taught her? Deathstroke? The soldier chides her for her brash impulsivity and she has the gall to get mad at him. Ren, he says firmly, you took out its eye. That was 100 yards, easy, a moving target, and a kid in the way. You could have accidentally blown his head off. I bristle, taking great offense to that. Blown his head off? Hardly. I guarantee I'm a better shot than anyone in Jordan's unit. He's not even in the silver block, which is where all the elite soldiers go. I think he told me he served in copper. I could outshoot a copper guy with my eyes closed. The soldier, whose name is Jordan by the way, offers to drop her home. At this point, even I am starting to get annoyed at how oblivious he is. Get a life, Jordan. She somehow manages to shrug him off and finally takes off towards the ranch where she lives. It is at this point that we are introduced to Wolf. Who is Wolf? Her friend who she has never met, who she only talks with telepathically. Why is he called Wolf? Because his favorite animal is a wolf. I'm serious. What do you think is the probability that Wolf and her love interest will turn out to be the same person? She finally reaches home and we get a sweet bonding moment between her and her uncle, along with a crash course on what his personality is like. Danny, maybe save some backstory for the rest of the chapters. The next day, she goes to a corner of the ranch to run some errands when Jim telepathically informs her that the military is at their house and so she should stay away. Will she stay away? Of course not. She comes running back, but oh, she approaches from the high ground. Because of the stunt she pulled yesterday, the military realizes that her uncle is on their most wanted list and they arrest him. They leave a soldier behind to arrest her when she shows up, but she escapes through the back roads and shows up at her friend's place. This is literally the first smart thing this woman has done. She contacts the network and they help her get to the capital. Why do they help her? We do not know. Fortunately, over the years, the uprising had successfully infiltrated every level in the company, including intelligence. 10 minutes before I boarded the train, our operative hacked into my file to lift the flag. She does it under the guise of a system glitch and warns us that the system will reset itself in 6 hours. That gives me just enough time to reach the city. Once I'm there, the flag will return and I'll be designated a person of interest again, which means keeping a low profile at all costs. Will she keep a low profile? Obviously not. The train ride to the capital is filled with flashbacks. We get a brief glimpse of her uncle teaching her how to use her powers. And she is so damn good that she picks everything up in the first try. He looks startled. How did you do that? Do what? Open the path so fast. I wrinkled my forehead. It wasn't that fast, but I suppose it was. I always forget that there are others whose powers aren't as strong as mine or as plentiful. Ma'am, you are here to save your uncle from a fate you subjected him to. Maybe stop boasting for 2 seconds. The network tells her that her uncle is to be executed the following morning and that they are not planning on rescuing him because he has not been useful to them in 15 years. Fair enough. But not to Ren. She's like, I'll do it myself. I snuck out of the safe house at dawn. The network is probably already trying to track me down, but I know how to stay hidden. I grew up in the dark after all. I am a shadow. She is so annoying. She shows up bright and early for the execution. Now, here we learn that one of her powers is mind control, which in this book is referred to as inciting. She tries to save her uncle by inciting the soldiers to shoot themselves. She almost succeeds, but at the end moment, it fails. And she gets captured, which is what her uncle was trying to avoid with his dying breath. The military puts her in a room with three soldiers, one of whom is the guy I have been referring to as love interest. They are completely convinced that she is a silver blood, but she is able to bullshit her way out of it. As a final last ditch attempt, they bring in Jade Vance, a silver blood who defected to the military. Jade tries to read Ren's mind, but what do you know? Uncle Jim has prepared her for this scenario as well. Jade sits and stares at me. She doesn't say another word. This is the interrogation I have heard about from people in the uprising. She won't ask a single question. When she forms a path, it is not subtle. She's not trying to hide it. She isn't gently pushing her way into my mind as if dipping a timid toe in frigid water. There's a reason for that. Because if you don't ease into it, it sends an electric shock up the back of a silverblood's neck. It's nearly impossible not to react, not to jerk, flinch, or move when an electric current courses through you, unless you've trained for that too. Is there anything you haven't trained for? So she feeds Jade a bunch of her cherry picked thoughts, and Jade is fooled. The best mind reader in the continent is no match for Ren Darlington. Yes, that's her name. I know. Even though she successfully fools everyone, she is thrown into jail. And at night, her love interest shows up in the cell. You could not begin to guess his name. Are you ready for it? Cross Redden. Imagine that. Our leads are Ren and Cross. Cross offers her to join his elite troops because he doesn't trust her and he wants to keep an eye on her. You don't have to put her in the military, especially since you suspect her of mind control. Onboarding begins the next day, and you know those students who were not really funny but felt the need to comment on everything anyways? Yeah, Ren is one of them. I'm Second Lieutenant Xavier Ford, and I'll be your head instructor for this session. You can call me Sir or LT, no preference. I wonder if he stole the speech from Captain Cross. Is taken, so I'll have to call this one Prick. He sweeps his gaze over the room. Some of you applied for this program, others were recruited. His eyes flick towards me. I believe forced is the word he is looking for. Stop talking. She sits in class and immediately tries to read everyone's mind. This is why I'm so loath to do this. Mind reading is the greatest invasion of privacy that exists. And everyone, even primes, deserve their privacy. Your mind is the one place where you should feel completely and unequivocally safe. People like me rob you of that refuge, and each time I read an unsuspecting mind, I hate myself a little bit more. Don't do it then? Nobody asked you to. The recruiters drop a pop quiz, and Ren scores 60% on purpose. During the first day of class, she befriends a girl called Liddy. Liddy gives Ren, and by extension us, a brief about other recruits. As they keep talking, another recruit known as Kane starts flirting with her. Just like that, it is night time. It's time to sleep, and there are 23 beds, but there are 24 recruits. Apparently, it's a test, and the recruit who sleeps on the floor basically gets cut from the program. That's exactly what Ren wants, and so she volunteers as tribute. Now, you would think that she would sleep on the floor, but no. She burrows into Kane's bed, along with him. Nothing happens though. And the next day, Cross doesn't cut her from the program either. He does, however, flirt with her in a manner that I can only describe as gross. You should cut me, I say hopefully. No, the dimple threatens to appear again. I grit my teeth. Does it get you off? The idea of forcing women to do things they don't want to do? I didn't realize you were so interested in what gets me off. I recoil. I'm not. His gaze locks with mine. Are you sure? Positive. That's a shame. I would be happy to satisfy your curiosity. He closes the distance between us, and a shiver runs through me when he dips his head close to whisper in my ear. I like it rough. Excuse me? The power dynamics here have all sorts of alarm bells ringing in my head. They go back to the class together, and this is where we realize that Cross is actually the dictator's son. His speech to the class is a lazy attempt at world building. We do not enforce the law, Cross says. That is the responsibility of the tin block. We do not patrol the streets. That is the responsibility of copper and gold. Our skills are better utilized for more critical duties. Our mission is to locate faithful camps and disband them, to detect criminal enterprises within our cities and dismantle them, to rid our streets and our wards of silverbloods. It is at this point that Cross's half-brother, Ro, makes an appearance. There's some tension between the brothers, but otherwise the meeting is uneventful. Later, in the weapons class, Ren misses almost every shot on purpose, earning her a 10%. The next few pages kinda get repetitive and boring as Ren attends classes and complains about being stuck, at the same time doing nothing about it. Then one night she goes on a walk and comes across an unlocked gate and an unattended motorbike. So of course she hops on and drives away, but Cross catches up to her with ease. He gives her two choices, imprisonment or training, and she chooses training. Okay, so she can keep her head down and complete the entire training with below average scores, and she will be cut off from the program. But no, she chooses to pick a fight with everyone and do everything in her power to stand out. This protagonist is so frustrating. And listen, I know most 21-year-olds are impulsive. I was too at that age. But like, why isn't there a shred of self-preservation instinct? So Ren continues to pretend to be terrible and Kane continues to flirt with her and they continue with their classes. One day at breakfast, Ren realizes that everyone knows about Uncle Jim and now everyone is suspicious of her. She continues to deny that he was a silver blood and even picks a fight with a recruit to defend his honor, as she puts it, which gets her sent to Cross for disciplinary action. And this is the conversation that follows. His stride is pure arrogance as he walks towards me. I hold my ground despite my accelerating heartbeat, but then he touches my lips and my heart stops in my chest. This mouth, he warns, his thumb scraping the seam of my lips until it reaches the cut in the corner. Is going to get you in trouble, Dove. It's hard to draw a breath. When I finally do, my chest rises and his gaze lowers to it. He tells her that he will not punish her if she is able to slip past him and get to the door. Of course, this is an excuse for tons of inappropriate touching.
Stop it. Get some help.
Like Cross, get away from her. The power dynamics just keep worsening. Her punishment for hitting another recruit is that all 24 recruits have to keep running until sunrise. Over the next few days, her friendship with Kane and Liddy starts deepening and she talks to Wolf a few times. Then one night, as she's sneaking around the facility, she comes across a tunnel which leads her to the place where Uncle Jim was executed. Cross shows up not 2 minutes later. Does this guy have no other job than to stalk her day and night? They talk about good and evil and about fate and trust. Then they go back to the barracks. In the next test, she is paired with Kes, the recruit she got in a fight with about Uncle Jim's honor. Does it surprise you to learn that they fail? On purpose? A few days later, she's in the bunks alone when Anson, this creepy guy who's been staring at her for a while, shows up and tries to do some very bad things to her. But she can hold her own, especially with the help of a tiny knife that she stole from the test she failed. However, before she can extract her revenge, Cross shows up. He sends Anson away but does not take the knife from Ren. Good job, Cross. And that is how we come to the pit night. Ren is not sure what it is, but she does get ready with Liddy and Bettima. The former lends her makeup and the latter lends her some clothes. Do you want to guess what she wears to the pit? Bettima appraises me as I zip up the jeans. Her hips are narrower than mine, so the denim is tighter around my waist and rear, but they mostly fit. Outstanding, she says, then tosses me a top. Try this. I peel off my uniform shirt, leaving me in a bra. Fortunately, Anson's not here. I know where his eyes would be if he were. She's given me a black crop top with thin straps and a perilously low neckline. I slip it over my head but can barely tug it over my chest. The shirt ends just above my belly button, barring my stomach, and the neckline is racier than I prefer. You're pure smoke, Liddy tells me, smiling shyly. I love it. Turns out the pit is where the recruits go to drink and dance and fight. There's a little pit in the ground where Cross and Xavier have a literal fist fight. With every punch that Cross throws, Ren is getting more turned on. I think she needs to lay on ice for a couple of minutes. As she prepares to leave, Cross corners her in a dark spot and this is the conversation that follows. What did I tell you about touching me without permission? It's intended as a taunt, but we both hear my voice shake. It was just to steady you. He gives a deliberate stroke to my stomach before removing his hand. Then he leans close to my ear. His voice is velvet dipped in honey. Tell me to put my hand back. My breath is stuck in my throat. You're drunk, I tell him. Any other woman would have asked me to kiss her. We'd already be heading back to my quarters. My core clenches. Tempting. It's so tempting, my mouth runs dry. Despite my better judgment, I reach up and touch him. Is that what you want me to do? Ask you to take me back to your quarters? His breath hisses as my fingers trace the line of his jaw. God, that's a strong jaw. Because I can assure you that's not going to happen. I'm not interested, Captain. I see his lips curve before he leans in again. His breath tickles my ear. Stop lying. Stop lying? She told you to back off, Cross. Even if she wants you, which we only know because we hear her inner monologue, she told you to back off. So just leave her be. An indefinite amount of time later, the recruits are supposed to complete some divergence inspired tasks like climbing buildings without harness or safety gear. Predictably, someone dies. Very sad. Anyways, Betima takes it particularly hard. Back at their bunks, Ren takes her to the rooftop to talk it all out, but soon Ro and Anson join them. Ro tries so hard to play the mysterious asshole, but he's a teenager. His inner monologue makes me cringe. But Ren is no better. Travis says Dad does the same thing every time with his important guests. Puffs them up, strokes their ego so that they feel like a monarch from the old era. Even if it's just at a dinner party. But me, I don't let people win. They want to be better than me, then they need to actually be better than me. He chuckles. Why should they have it easy? Because you have never had it easy, right? This boy in front of me is both predictable and unpredictable. I hate paradoxical people. Exactly. Must be hard to walk upright, I say, with that chip on your shoulder. Ro shrugs. It's easy to tell when someone's trying to deceive you. He suspects Betima of being a silver blood, and without a warning, Betima is gone. And how does Ren cope with it? By making out with Kane, of course. The flirty guy has to be the sensible one and stop her. What's wrong with this woman? And this comes right after she compares his grief to hers. I feel Kane's gaze on me, and when I turn back in his direction, what I see helps pacify some of the nasty feelings I was having towards him. Pain. There's genuine pain creasing his features. Losing Betima hurts him. Maybe not as much as it hurts me, but I am encouraged that at least on some level he considers this a loss. How do you know how much it hurts him? This woman is infuriating. The next morning, the recruits are told to resume their duties as usual, but this doesn't sit right with Rin, so she goes running to Cross. I don't know what she's expecting of him. The entire country hates Silverbloods. People are killed on the suspicion of being a Silverblood. Why do you think people would care that you made a stink? Coincidentally, Cross is arguing with his father about Betima when Ren realizes the futility of her drama and backs away. Sensible instance number 2. One thing becomes abundantly clear to her. She needs to escape before she is caught. In physical training, she lets Kes break her arm, which she hopes will get her respite for a couple of days. But Cross flies in a Silverblood healer to take care of the arm. So some Silverbloods have pledged loyalty to the general and are now living a kind of comfortable life. I wonder why Ren couldn't do that. Survival and morals just don't go hand in hand. She tells Kane what Cross did, and immediately that night, she is contacted by the network after being no contact ever since her uncle died. A smart woman would have explored the probability that Kane works for the network. But Ren is not smart, so a member of the network meets with Ren and tasks her with infiltrating the Silver Elites. The next day, this happens. We start with easy targets and I nail all my shots. I do well enough that Jones raises a brow and drawls. Someone's been practicing after hours. Someone's been making shots like that since she was 10 years old. Kes sneers. It's just a fluke. I've been up all night reading sniper tips on my source. I lie. How to account for the wind, different magnifications. It's actually a lot more interesting than I thought. Is that the most believable excuse in her tiny brain? Couldn't you come up with a better excuse? Better yet, couldn't you grow organically? We all know how much Cross likes her. So as long as she was competent by the end, I think Cross would have picked her for the Silver Elites. I guess I am putting more thought into this book than the writer did. Now that she's finally putting in effort, Cross keeps trying to sabotage her. Instead of seeking an appointment at his office like a normal person, Ren drops into his bedroom in the middle of the night. He's not exactly alone, but the moment Ren drops in, he dismisses his companion. After a long and pointless discussion, he promises to evaluate her fairly. Couldn't he have done that to begin with? Does he reprimand her for leaving her bunkers without permission or dropping into his room unexpectedly? Hell no. Cross is only there to look good and give her second chances. The next training is called Wait for Rescue. Ren and Kane are hostages, and their only orders are to sit down and wait for others to rescue them. At this point, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that they do not, in fact, wait for rescue. Can I go on a bit of a rant here? I hate it when the badass female main character is told to wait and they completely disregard their instructions and take matters into their own hands. Because when you are a part of the team, you are only as strong as your weakest link. I would expect a badass to understand that their role in the team is to help the entire team grow, so that she does not have to waste her valuable time on pointless rescue missions. Too many writers these days are passing off impulsivity as bravery, and that grinds my gears. Danny tries to do something different by having Ren fail because she did not follow instructions. We are so close. All you have to do is give them consequences. Today's drills were tiring, but I feel wired now. Or not. So yeah, Ren indulges in her favorite hobby of walking around the base after lights out. Man, it must be nice to have the commander at your beck and call. Of course, within a minute, Cross comes sniffing. I know you want her, but have some self-respect, my man. I don't get involved with recruits. His jaw clenches with frustration. And now I'm frustrated and annoyed and so angry about how desperately every part of me craves him. He doesn't get involved with recruits? Well, I don't get involved with guys whose fathers are responsible for killing thousands of people like me. I don't get involved with guys who think I'm defective and wouldn't want me if they knew the truth. Hey Ren, here's a revolutionary idea. If you do not want to get involved with him, leave his room. His face is too close again, his mouth hovering over mine in a phantom touch. The last threads of my willpower are unraveling inside me. When he releases a strangled noise, I feel it everywhere. I need to know what you taste like. Let me have it, Dove. I lick my lips and he groans again. Let me have it. Hello, FBI, campus security. Dude, she is here because you will ensure that she ends up in prison otherwise. Her fate is in your hands. Do you not see the power imbalance? Cross really needs an ice bath. So they kiss a little bit and then Ren runs away. And with that, it is time for the undercover operation section of the dystopia. Do you want to venture a guess as to what Ren is going undercover as? A lady of the night. Because why not? Sometimes it's more advantageous to leave the criminals be. Nelson's a low-level threat and good for intel when we need it. So I'm hitting her up for intel? What do I need to find out? Have you not been listening in class all week? At this point, if you expect this woman to have a shred of common sense, then my friend, you are the idiot. Anyways, her mission is to go into this illegal brothel and ask for a job. And so she goes and talks to the owner, and as an audition, the owner asks her to seduce a client. And that client is, of course, Cross. And he has such sweet and romantic lines like, I was wrong before. You make a very good love. And they say chivalry is dead. Because I think even at 12 years old, you were a force to be reckoned with, Dove. His fingertips graze my cheek with a feather-light touch. Each second stretches taut, the sexual awareness between us like a thread on the verge of snapping. Enough about me, I blurt out. Tell me about you, Captain. Do you like your father? The abrupt subject change startles him. What kind of question is that? She may be an expert markswoman and she may have these amazing powers, but gathering intel is not one of her strong suits, clearly. He toys around with her for a bit and then tells her to push him and walk away. She chooses to slap him across the face, and you know what? I'll allow it. He deserves it after the way he has been behaving. Later in the night, they meet in his office for debriefing and they do everything except debriefing. And by that, I mean they go all the way. Wonderful. This woman is insane. It is through sheer luck that she hasn't died yet. Many times over. And this man is a nepo baby. There is no other reason he should be the captain, given the stupid decisions he's been making. The next day, they are supposed to do this exercise called Fallen Soldier, where they have to rescue their injured partner. Ren is paired up with Liddy. It is not difficult to figure out that the entire objective is basically to drop your partner and rescue yourself. But Ren is not like other girls. Because, she's a good person. I'm sorry, where were your morals last night? I am the most stubborn person I know. If he pairs me with Liddy or Kane tomorrow, I don't know if I can leave them in that hallway. But I also promised Adrian and the Uprising that I would get into Elite. Is one silly drill worth risking my place in the program? She asks after failing twice. A protagonist should not be this infuriating, right? Later, when I'm putting my source away for the day, I notice there's an update to my scores. I click it to discover my fallen soldier's score has changed from fail to pass. I wonder how he'll explain that one to his instructors. So Cross's entire character arc is to help Ren stay out of trouble, huh? What exactly in his backstory justifies him being so lenient with her? Is she just that awesome that Cross can't help give her infinite second chances? This man is the son of a dictator. One wouldn't be wrong to assume that his life must have been insanely disciplined. But sure, yeah, let's throw that all away for a lady you have known for less than 6 months. The next test is called resistance to interrogation, and I will admit it gets a bit graphic in the torture. What infuriates me is that even when she is in pain, she cannot resist gloating. The pitch black welcomes me once more, almost comforting. I'm not scared of the dark. This is just a nice morning in the Blacklands for me.
Bruh.
The interrogation lasts for 5 days, but she passes. She gets elected to the silver block and gets shortlisted for the silver elites. Apparently, there's one more test left. Given the title of the book and given how amazingly awesomely talented our main character is anyone questioning whether she'll make it? Before the final test, it's pit night. Ren borrows a skimpy dress, but she's disappointed that Cross isn't there. This woman does not think with her brain. But not to worry. She wanders around until she finds him and they have a quick makeout session behind a pillar. Now here's my problem with that scene. Somebody's behind the pillar is somebody else's in front of the pillar. If you do not want people to know about your extracurricular activities, maybe don't perform said activities where everyone can see you. The makeout session is interrupted when Cross's creepy brother, Ro, calls out to him. Ro challenges Cross to a fight and Cross wins with ease. It is embarrassingly obvious there is no comparison at all by any conceivable measure, and yet he can't shut his mouth, can't admit defeat. I'm sorry, are you complaining about someone talking too much? Is the pot calling the kettle black? The next day, 12 people gather for the final test. The test is quite simple, really. 2 people walk into a room. The winner joins the silver elites. The loser joins the silver block, which still not bad. Ren is paired with Bryce, a typical dystopian Regina George knockoff. And of course, Ren wins. Whoever doubted her? This overachieving epitome of human femininity will get everything she desires and more, even if she's stupid by every conceivable measure. The Silver Elites move into their new quarters, which are much more lavish than the bunks they had been sharing until now. About 5 seconds after she enters the room, Cross shows up to help her break the bed in. I didn't realize a captain in a military dictatorship is that jobless. I'm doing it your way for now, Dove, but only until I no longer feel like it. He smiles as he releases me. Ew, icky, gross. Someone get me a spray bottle. Ren attends her first meeting as a Silver Elite. Conveniently, all of her friends have made it to Silver Elites. Ren is tasked with gathering intel about a smuggler known as Jasper Reed, whereas 2 other recruits have a secret mission in her hometown of Hamlet. Hamlet with 2 T's. Yeah, she passes on any relevant information to the network, but when she tells her handler that she's going to talk to that friend from the town square, whom she has been intermittently talking to the whole time, her handler forbids it. For once, she uses her brain and informs her friend anyways. Good job for showing the bare minimum levels of IQ, Ren. Xavier, Ren and Kane spent 3 days gathering intel. This intel leads them to a hospital which the smuggler is using as a supply base. Going into the hospital, Ren's orders are to find the medical supply stash. Does she follow those orders? What do you think? She finds a group of people locked away in a room and immediately ditches her mission to go investigate. And this is the author's mastermind convoluted setup to introduce the fragmented Silverbloods whose minds are not strong enough for their gifts and therefore they have been reduced to a blubbering mess. It is heavily implied that the general has been experimenting on them, but no concrete proof is provided. Now look, I am already pissed off that she poked her nose where it did not belong. But if you're going to do something stupid, you may as well go all the way. Not only does she not save these fragmented Silverbloods, she does not help them in any way, shape or form. She walks around the room, takes a good look at them and then leaves. I do not know what purpose this scene will serve, but it feels like it was clumsily shoved in to foreshadow something that will come up later. Anyways, they find their missing supplies, which I don't know how that works. It's a hospital. Supplies are expected. Did they just assume that everything in the basement was smuggled stuff? But her mission is complete, and as soon as she is airlifted, she reports everything back to the network. We are only a few minutes into takeoff when Xavier gets an alert. He touches his earpiece, then unbuckles himself and marches towards the cockpit. Change of plans, I hear him tell our pilot. We are going to Z. My spine snaps into a rigid line. Z, I echo when he retakes his seat. Cross requested backup. He smirks at me. Looks like you're going home. In Ward Z, the Silver Elites have found that her friend, whose name is Tana by the way, and her father have been helping the network. They are both to be executed, but Ren convinces Cross to send them to the labor camp instead. As if slaving away for 12 hours a day for the rest of your life is any better than death. And just like that, a couple of months pass. The silver jubilee of the general taking power is soon approaching, and Lady wants to take Ren shopping for a dress to wear on the occasion. The last thing I'm thinking about is the general's ridiculous silver jubilee. Who wants to celebrate 25 years of that man's iron fist up our ass? Everyone here, right. Sometimes I forget that I'm surrounded by primes who actually like and respect General Redden. In preparation for the festivities, the Silver Elites go through a mandatory wellness check, where a silver blood named Ellis, who is loyal to the general, heals all their wounds. Ren has scars on her thigh, which Uncle Jim gave her to hide a red circle that marks her as a silver blood. Ellis offers to heal that scar, which Ren understandably declines. When Cross pushes her, she feeds him a bullshit story about how her scars are supposed to remind her to learn from her mistakes or something. Like I said, bullshit story, but he buys it. Moving on, Cross takes Ren out on a date, and the date includes such romantic banter as, "Did you bring me here to kill me?" He snickers. "No, there are a lot easier ways to kill you. Bullet in the head, smother you in your sleep." "You're so romantic." That gets me another laugh. I like this. What? This less bitchy side of you. Don't pretend you don't like the bitchy side. I love it, but this is nice too. Do you want to guess where he's taking her? To see a garden of glowing flowers. Some sort of mutation, she explains. And as to why he took her there? Here's the explanation. A sense of awe tightens my throat. I've never seen something like this. It's beautiful. I turn to find Cross watching me. What? I thought you might like it. I could have brought you synthetic flowers. A nice little bouquet in a vase of water. But that's not you. He gestures to the flowers that are practically exploding from the cave walls. This is you. Wild, mysterious. I laugh, yet part of me is melting. This is the most romantic thing a man has ever done for me. You know what? This is actually romantic. Good job, Cross. Their date is interrupted when Cross gets an emergency call and they rush to his house in a chopper. There's something wrong with his mother, so he tells Ren to stay in the living room on the ground floor while he goes and takes care of her on the first floor. Of course, she wanders around the house immediately after he leaves. And the only reason she stumbles into his mother's room is so that we, the readers, can get this plot twist. The woman spins around so fast, I jump in surprise. A pair of wide-set blue eyes meets mine with an empty stare that sends a shiver skittering down my spine. The complete absence of emotion is unsettling as hell. But it doesn't remain that way. For a moment, I can tell she's registering my presence because confusion etches into her face. Then she blinks and shakes her head, and her gaze shifts from confused to vacant, back and forth, confused, blink, vacant, blink, as if her brain is struggling to keep her present. Unease churns in the pit of my stomach. I've seen that expression before, those same erratic blinks. Either I'm completely crazy or Cross's mother is a silver blood. So they feed his mother some soup and she wanders around the room until she comes across a painting which has been described to her many times before by Wolf. What did I tell you? Predictable, dude. Predictable and easy. She spends days wondering how to bring it up to Cross. One day, after they are done with the deed, she describes to Cross a nightmare that Wolf has spoken about many times. And Cross confirms that he is indeed Wolf. "Who are you?" he repeats, his breath escaping in a hiss. "Who told you that story?" "Can I try to speak through the laughter. Can I ask you something?" He raises the knife. Just millimeters. He's still wound tighter than a cobra. He can slice my throat at any second. "Is your favorite animal still a wolf?" He freezes, staring at me as if he can't comprehend what I'm asking. Because mine isn't a daisy anymore. My favorite flower, I mean. Gee, thank you for clarifying that daisy is a flower and not an animal. Whatever would I do without that info? Now look, revealing to Wolf that you are his closest friend, that I can understand. But revealing to the captain of the Silver Elites that you work for the network, now that is stupidity. And even more stupid is that Cross does nothing with that info. Granted, he can't report her because revealing her identity means revealing his own identity. But what is stopping him from doing to her what Ro did to Betima and then claiming that she was a Silverblood? Her uncle was executed for being a Silverblood. Everybody already suspects her of being a Silverblood. So why not? As they are coming to terms with what this means for their relationship, Cross gets a ping that a decommissioned weapons depot is under attack from the network. Cross, Ren, Xavier, Taylor, Kane and Jones rush to the depot to arrest the rebel pilot who flew the plane into the building. Once there, they break into two groups. Ren, Cross and Xavier secure the perimeter while the others investigate the area around the plane. Within a few minutes, a secondary explosion takes out the other group, which consists of Taylor, Kane and Jones. When the surviving members try to return to the base, they realize that one of the two choppers that they came flying in is missing now. That was the rebels' target all along. Genius or stupid? I'll let you decide. Beside Cross, Xavier has fallen silent. His gaze is unfocused, face drained of color. I'm confused for a second until the reminder slaps me in the face. Taylor's gone. Jones, Kane. A sob gets stuck in my throat. Did she just forget that her friend is dead? What is this depiction? Now that Cross knows that Ren works for the uprising, he is understandably suspicious that she was the mole. And even then, he doesn't arrest her. Please start being sensible for once. Giving her the silent treatment just is not enough. And his silent treatment is what prompts Ren to do the most stupid thing a fantasy heroine has ever done in any fantasy novel ever written. Are you ready for this? Do you remember the scars on her thigh? Remember how they were given to her to cover up the physical reminder of her being a Silverblood? Yeah, in an act of colossal stupidity, the likes of which fantasy has never seen, she gets her scar healed. I don't want to read this anymore. There's 75 pages left and I am done. I would love to DNF this book. This stupid decision is followed by radical honesty. She goes to Cross, shows him her mark and confesses every ability she has. To a person who already distrusts her. To the captain of the Silver Elites, who is supposed to execute Silverbloods on sight. I hope Ren makes half a sensible decision before this book ends. And the funny thing is, even Cross thinks it's a terrible idea. There's a beat of silence. Then his jaw clenches tight, and I'm startled by the flash of fire that ignites in his eyes. Damn it, Dove, how could you do such a stupid thing? My mouth falls open. You're angry at me for telling you the truth? I'm angry at you for exposing yourself, for removing the only layer of protection you had between you and your enemies. I blink. He's right. My chest rises as I draw a shaky breath. I know it was reckless. You think? But it seemed like a good idea at that time. Why would you ever put yourself at risk like that? Hey, at least the radical honesty has him back in her pants. Even if it's only a matter of time before the symbol on her thigh messes it up for both of them. Despite everything that has happened so far, Ren still helps the network by setting up charges in a supply room. The explosives taking up residence in my bag are nowhere near enough to do much damage to the supply room, let alone the entire base. She says, despite knowing that atomic bombs are a thing in this universe. And who catches her deploying these bombs if not Jade Vance? And Jade is not going to repeat the same mistake twice. Ren reaches out into Jade's mind and mind controls her into executing herself. And even then, Cross doesn't arrest her. Instead, he stays back to help clean her mess. I don't know why we needed him, given that Ren just set up charges in that room. Charges that are set to detonate in a few hours. Is anyone thinking here? Anyways, poor Ren is distraught at her actions. Am I supposed to feel sorry for her? On top of committing the stupidity of executing someone who is in the general's inner circle, Ren forgets to lock her room while she's changing. Liddy barges in and notices her mark. It is at this point that the genius that is Ren decides to put the entire blame on Cross. Ren is a Silverblood operative. Ivy is so stunned she has to brace her hand against the doorway for a second. What? I want to slap Liddy in the face, but I can't do that when I need her on my side. Is that true? Ivy demands. I dip my head in a nod. Only the general and his inner circle know. Cross is briefing the rest of Elite tomorrow. The general decided it would promote cohesion if they knew my real identity. I bite my lip. I'm a loyalist. I always have been. I promise you, both of you, I'm not a threat. Tonight, I'm going to put on a dress, shake the general's hand, and thank him profusely for everything he's done for us, for trusting us to be on the right side of history. Lieutenant Colonel Vance, Ellis, me. We are not like the others. And after putting her boyfriend's life in danger by placing the entire blame on him, she goes running to him for help. On my way, Dove. You should probably hurry. Things have gone from bad to worse over here. Liddy and Ivy saw my blood mark. You never should have removed that scar. I was trying to prove my love to you, and I did a stupid, impulsive thing. In my defense, I didn't think many people would see my bare thighs. I'm usually wearing clothes unless I'm with you. Please don't tell me you killed Liddy and Ivy. Liddy, no, but I did get rid of your ex-girlfriend. Daisy? Joking, I fed them a story about how I am an undercover elite. I'm your secret weapon and you're going to hold a briefing tomorrow to tell everyone in our unit. I keep holding on to the futile hope that Cross will stop thinking from between his legs. Alas, he's a character, not a person. So she shows up to the Silver Jubilee celebration. The general rounds up all his children for his epic Silver Jubilee speech. In the middle of said speech, Ren spots her handler, Adrian, who is trying to corrupt the general's mind, and she succeeds. Within a few minutes, the general goes from a figure of authority to a broken man who can barely string a sentence together. And that is when the charges that she set up blow off. Ren helps Adrian get to safety, and instead of escaping with Adrian, she goes back and tries to get Cross. Ro intercepts her and has her arrested. Of course, Liddy snitched. What else were you expecting? I can almost feel Uncle Jim's soul cringing in the book Afterlife at how stupid his ward is. He spent 15 years of his life trying to keep her safe. Not only did she get him killed, she also actively put herself in harm's way every step of the way. And now, within an year of his death, she has been outed and arrested. So once more, Ren is in jail. Cross shows up and tells her that she is to be executed the next morning. She reaches out to the network and they tell her that while they cannot extract her, if she manages to extract herself, they will definitely provide sanctuary. Yes, I want to believe in the word of people who have not helped me so far. So of course Cross facilitates her escape along with a little help from Xavier. The two of them manage to transport Ren from the capital all the way to the edge of the Blacklands. Cross urges her to keep going. Please don't make me do this alone. You won't be alone. He nods towards Xavier. I don't even turn my head. He's not you, I say stubbornly. Someone needs to keep Travis and Ro in line. I don't know what the ward will look like with them calling the shots. What do you mean them? Travis isn't going to put Ro in charge. Not officially, but he's never tried to rein in Ro. He's going to let him run loose and do whatever the hell he wants. I need to be here. His expression grows pained. My mother is here. I can't leave her either. I feel my heart splintering in my chest, the sharp slivers scraping over my ribs. It didn't even occur to me that he might not come with me. Because you refuse to use your brain. With a tearful goodbye, she leaves with Xavier. I'm sorry, why is Cross pushing her to take a normal person with him to meet the network? And why is she entertaining this idea? Why is Xavier? Best case, they see Xavier as Ren's friend and leave him at the rendezvous point. Worst case, they execute him. Either way, it doesn't seem like a good fate for him. I swear these people cannot see beyond their hand. They trek through the Blacklands for a day before they reach the cabin where Ren grew up. She finds a letter that he wrote for her, but we are not given its contents just yet. They trek for 2 more days before emerging on the other side. At least she has the good sense to ask Xavier to leave, but he has decided to be an idiot today. Let's see what consequences that decision brings. The 2 men in the chopper jump out to help Kane restrain an enraged Xavier. I cry out in protest, but they ignore me and get him on the ground, pinning him down. Horror fills my throat as they thrust his wrists behind his back to slap metal cuffs around them. Settle down, one of them barks. Fuck you, he snaps back. Stop this, I tell Kane. Let him go. He helped me. He's helping us. My not dead friend is unconvinced. We'll let Adrian and the authority decide that. He risked his life to get me out of the city, I insist. I don't think they'll care. Kane nods at the other man and they haul Xavier to his feet. Oh my god, who would have thought? Clearly not the main characters. We also learn that Kane is alive and he is the hotshot network pilot who has been referenced throughout the book. And apparently the only person with any shred of common sense. Why the hell would you bring Xavier Ford with you, cowgirl? He helped me. I don't care, and neither will the others. Why didn't you at least tell Adrian? Like, hey Adrian, I'm bringing a command lieutenant with me. Keen? Honestly, I forgot. I was so relieved to make it through the Blacklands that when I checked in with her, I was still riding the high. You forgot? If I wasn't so close to the end, I would have definitely DNF'd here. Kane asks her to get into the chopper and she takes a minute to telepathically call Cross. I thought she would tell her how big of a mistake it was to bring Xavier or that Xavier's life is in danger, but she chickens out. I open a path to Cross and pray that he links. Are you okay? Relief floods my body at the sound of his voice. Yes, we made it. I can't talk, but I just wanted to say I love you. I love you too, Dove. Reach out when you can. I feel empty when the path closes. Uncertain about my future. Ren, Kane prompts. Seconds tick by. 1, 3, 4, until I finally nod. I straighten my shoulders and follow him to the helicopter. And this is where the book ends. On the next page, we get the letter that Uncle Jim wrote to Ren. But I don't understand the significance of it. Her parents did not come up in the story. Her lineage is not a major reveal. Nothing in that letter indicates a twist that would have my jaw dropping. I don't know why it was kept to the end of the book. If it was supposed to become relevant in the sequel, I think it would make more sense to put it in book 2. As of now, I do not get the stylistic choice. Here's my big question. What is all the fuss about? The dystomans? Seriously? Look, I understand the need for love in dystopia. Everything is so hard and heavy and hopeless that you need love to survive. But the thing is, what this book had was not love. It was lust. Ren was obsessed with Cross, Cross was obsessed with Ren, there was a power imbalance that was never addressed. Here's the thing that bothers me. The protagonist making all the wrong decisions because she is obsessed with a boy in a situation where she's trying to survive just makes her sound stupid. I do not like to read books about stupid protagonists. So yeah, those were my thoughts and this was my review of Silver Elites. Was it better than Powerless? Yes, by a tiny margin. If you like this video, please check out the other videos on my channel. And if you're a cool girl, do check out my series Kitabi Keeda. It's full of books written by indie authors. It's well worth your time, I promise you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. That's all for today. I'll see you again hopefully very soon. Talk soon. Bye.